Chapter 87, 1941. Woods outside Ober-Salzberg. Falling again. Falling through a dark void. Liam had just enough time to wonder whether he was ever going to get used to the stomach-lurching sensation before he found himself waist-deep in a drift of powder snow. Oh, great. Liam looked round at the snow-covered pine trees, glowing almost a luminescent blue by the light of the quicksilver moon. Thick branches of fir needles were weighed down beneath a heavy shroud of fresh-fallen snow. Beneath the thin material of his SS uniform, he shivered. Jesus, it's freezing, he hissed under his breath, sending a plume of condensation out before him. Glad we're not just wearing wet pants now. Hang on, isn't that going to cause a contamination problem? Acceptable level of contamination at this point, replied Bob. We will return with our clothes. He stopped mid-stride for a moment, consulting data in his head. Information. 200 yards ahead is the road leading to the Eagle's Nest. Right. Recommendation. We attempt to acquire better weapons and appropriate clothing and disguise. Liam nodded eagerly at the suggestion of appropriate clothing. The support unit led the way, pushing through the wood's undergrowth, dislodging hissing showers of shifting snow from the low branches above them. They walked quietly through the hushed winter forest until finally Liam could make out a narrow road, snow shoveled to either side to keep it passable. Bob squatted down, surveying the way ahead, and Liam joined him. The road, little more than a dirt track, climbed the hill gently. 50 yards ahead, they could see a guard hut, picked out in the glow of a swivelling floodlight, sandbags on either side, and a raisable barrier blocking the way. A small smile crept across Liam's quivering lips. Nothing Bob can't handle there. If you can take out those guards, said Liam quietly, we could wait right there for Kramer. Bob nodded. Affirmative. That is a good plan. I shall. He froze. Bob, what is it? I have just detected emerging tachyon particles in the vicinity. His grey eyes swiveled onto Liam. A time window has just been opened nearby. What? You sure it's not traces of our own time window you're picking up? It is not us. Liam glanced at the trees around them. Nearby? Very close. Within 300 yards of our position. Foster's guesswork must have been wrong. This guy, Kramer, hadn't already been back in 1941 for some time working at getting an audience with Hitler. He'd only just arrived. I am detecting a significant number of decaying particles. And that means one large displacement window, or many smaller windows. Liam bit his lip with dawning realization. It's not just Kramer on his own, is it? It was then they heard movement through the trees, faint at first, the swish of a snow-laden branch pushed aside, the soft clink and rattle of webbing and carried equipment, the hushed whisper of several voices, all of it coming their way. Recommendation, we should hide. Liam looked around in the darkness. The glow of the moonlight made everything that wasn't snow-covered stand out in stark contrast. Unless they could quickly bury themselves, they were going to be spotted. He looked up at the tree they were squatting beneath. Up there, he pointed, in the tree. Bob nodded. Without a moment's hesitation, he grabbed Liam and effortlessly hefted him up onto the lowest branch. Silently, and with the grace of a gymnast on parallel bars, he swung up beside him, the bench creaking worryingly beneath his immense weight. The noises grew subtly louder, closer, until Liam was able to see movement. Dark shapes warily emerged from beneath the shadow of trees, stepping cautiously across the glowing snow below them, then, almost unbelievably, coming to a halt beneath the very tree they were hiding in. They squatted down and surveyed the track heading up to the hill, just as Bob had been doing a moment earlier. Then he heard one of them talking softly. This is it, Karl. This is it. Hitler's winter retreat. An accent he vaguely recognized. He recalled the precise tones, the voice of recited speeches endlessly broadcast over the prison camp speakers. Kramer. A second voice. Der Keilstein House, the Eagle's Nest. It does not appear that heavily guarded. This one had a clipped, different-sounding accent. Liam strained to hear what the men said next, their voices quieter still. Then Kramer spoke more clearly. A little further up the hillside, only a few hundred yards away, is an SS garrison housing 400 or 500 of them. They will happily die to defend their leader. Your men will have to be very fast, Carl. His voice dropped again, then the second murmured response. Liam turned to look at Bob, perched perfectly still on the branch beside him, like a night owl watching the progress of some small rodent, and poised, ready to leap. "Switch to night sights, gentlemen," hissed the second man. In the darkness below them, Liam saw something glowing a soft, ghostly green among the gathered men. Then several more. He realized they were goggles of some sort. "Mr. Kramer, sir," whispered one of the men. "It is Kramer." Liam felt his heart suddenly flutter. "What is it, Rudy?" "Will we actually get to meet Adolf Hitler tonight? For real?" Another heavily accented voice. "Yes, Rudy, you will. Tonight, gentlemen." Kramer raised his voice from a whisper to a soft murmur for them all to hear. "We are going to write a brand new history together." Bob tapped Liam on the arm. They were too close to the men below to be able to talk. Instead, the support unit gestured at them, an unmistakable gesture that told him, "I am ready." Liam swallowed anxiously, feeling his gut churning once again with fear. Gritting his teeth, he nodded. "Do it." Chapter 88, 1941, Woods outside Ober-Salzberg. Bob dropped silently down out of the tree onto the men below. Liam heard the heavy thud of his body and the unmistakable crack of bones. Then, all hell broke loose. Voices brittle with alarm and confusion. The dark swirling scrum of figures below, illuminated for a freeze-frame second by the single muzzle flash of a silenced weapon. Bob, a bloodied knife in one hand, mid-slash across the chest of one man, his other big hand crushing the throat of another of them. Several more strobing muzzle flashes in the confusing darkness, accompanied by the muted puff of a silenced rifle. The fleeting lights showed 4 tangled bodies on the ground already, blood pooling away across the snow. Bob thrashing at another man with lethal speed and agility, and at least a dozen more men around him recovering from the moment of surprise and cocking their guns to fire. "I have to help him." Liam pulled the pistol out of its holster and aimed it at one of the dark outlines, one of the men who looked nearest ready to fire, and pulled the trigger. The loud crack from his gun echoed through the trees, no doubt rousing the SS guards up the track. One of the men below him grunted and went down, clutching his thigh. "My God, I actually heard something." Having now given his position away, he realized he couldn't sit perched upon the branch anymore. Grimacing and gritting his teeth, he dropped down to the ground into the thick of the fight. He landed heavily on the back of one of the dead men. Around him, all he could hear was the grunting, the laboured breath of a dozen or more men. Shrill words barked in German, accented English, and 1 or 2 other languages. "There! Shoot him! Shoot! Shoot! Out of the way, Schwartz!" A machine gun spewed a salvo of muzzle-suppressed taps and lit the scene with flickering light. Liam saw Bob take 6 shots to the chest, his black tunic erupting with exit wounds and geysers of dark blood. Not enough to stop him, though. In an instant, he was upon the one who'd fired, his blade a lethal flash of quicksilver death across the man's throat. Another short burst from someone else caught Bob from behind, and once more his uniform tunic danced, tattered, ripped, and bloody. Liam fired several rapid-fire rounds at the dark shape. It buckled and fell to the snow. Bob leapt forward at another man, his hand twisting the blade into him, but he was slowing down now. Still a deadly force, but no longer with the devastating whiptail speed of a lethal predator. Instead, he had the lumbering energy of a cornered and exhausted mammoth, his flesh and blood body weakened by too many wounds to recover from. Another short, silenced burst of gunfire, sounding like a walking stick dragged across a wooden picket fence. Bob staggered back heavily. Toten Sie ein! Another rattle of suppressed fire. Bob clapped to his knees, wavered for a moment before falling face forward into the snow. A torch snapped onto Liam. Caught in its glare, he instantly tossed the gun aside and raised his hands. Don't shoot, please. The torch panned across his face, blinding him. On your knees! Liam dropped down into the snow. Who the hell are you? My name's Liam. Who sent you? There was no official name for the agency, none that Foster had been prepared to tell him anyway. I'm an agent from the future. The torch beam dropped down, out of his face, and Liam could now see from the glow that only 4 of them remained standing. The man holding the torch spoke again. From the future, so soon? Said Kramer. There was bitterness in his voice, bitter and resentful that his bid to change history had already, after mere minutes, been intercepted. Liam knew for certain his life was now going to be measured in minutes, if not mere seconds. But this is impossible. Waldstein's was the only machine, snapped Kramer. You have to keep him talking, Liam. Keep him talking. No, Kramer, you're wrong. The people I work for have machines. We're here to protect history. Kramer took a step towards him. But why? He shook his head angrily. Why? The world we've come from, it's dying. We killed it with our pollution. We overpopulated it, sucked it dry of resources, wiped out almost every other species. He squatted down in front of Liam. Why would anyone want to preserve that kind of future? Liam looked up at him. He realized from the haunted expression on Kramer's face that perhaps he wasn't driven by greed or an insatiable thirst for power, but perhaps by better intentions. Why would anyone want to protect that? He asked again. I've seen the future you make, uttered Liam, with my own eyes. It's a world of ashes and ruins. Kramer's eyes narrowed. What? You'll end up doing something terrible, and it'll destroy the world. Leave nothing. The future may be bad, but what you do only makes it far worse. One of the 3 men stepped forward and stood beside Kramer. We came back here to make a better world, he said adamantly, not to destroy it. It was the heavily accented man, the one called Carl. Liam shook his head. But somehow that's exactly what you'll end up doing. Something will go wrong. Something you do will lead to a... What was it Foster said? A nuclear war. And there'll be nothing left. Liam looked from one of them to the other. God help me, I've seen what's left of humanity. Pitiful ghouls, living on each other's flesh. Carl's eyes widened. For a moment, he looked lost, confused. If there is a hell, if there really is, then I've seen it, said Liam. And it'll be your actions that create it. Paul. Carl turned to Kramer. Paul, could this be true? Kramer shook his head, his eyes searching for truth in Liam's face. In the distance, they heard a siren begin to wail. Liam's unsilenced gunshots had clearly alerted the SS guards. The entire regiment would be roused and combing the woods soon. You say you have seen this for yourself? Asked Kramer. Liam nodded. And I think I'd rather die here than go back to that. Clouds of vapour filled the space between them, caught like fleeting pale ghosts in the beam of torchlight. "Paul," said Carl, "this must be a lie." Kramer's face was shrouded with conflicting thoughts, conflicting emotions. In the distance they could hear the barking of dogs over the mournful wailing of sirens. Voices raised and growing closer. Kramer shook his head. Something in the expression on his face, the glint in his haunted eyes, told Liam that deep inside his troubled mind a decision was being made. But what it was, he'd never know. A burst of silenced gunfire ripped through the stillness. Kramer's Arctic camouflage jacket spat blood, and then he flopped to the ground. Carl and the other two men turned round to open fire on Bob. The support unit was splayed on his back, holding one of their machine guns loosely in its left hand. Most of their unaimed shots sent divots of dry snow into the air, but all of Bob's shots hit home, dropping each of the three men with surgical precision. "Bob!" gasped Liam, scrambling across wet with blood, snow stained dark as night. "Bob, I thought you were dead." Up close, he could see the support unit had taken too many chest and stomach wounds to possibly survive. "Information," he gurgled blood out of the side of his mouth. "No. Shh, Bob," whispered Liam, cradling the support unit's head in his lap. His coarse dark hair, grown over the last 6 months and long enough to lose a fist in, was matted and wet from a head wound. Bob's grey eyes blinked and fluttered. He was doing some housekeeping on his hard drive, collating files, compressing data. "Bob?" His eyes cleared and locked on Liam. "Mission Priority 1. You must destroy the weapons. Advanced weapons technology." "Yes. Yes, of course." "Gather the weapons together. Destroy them with a grenade," he said, pointing towards an equipment satchel lying on the snow nearby. "Grenades are in that bag. Use one. Set off the others." Liam nodded and realized there were warm tears running down his cheeks. Realized he was shedding tears for a broken machine. "Bob, You must be quiet and listen." He could hear voices now, dozens of them calling out to each other, and baying dogs eager to be let off the leash. In the distance, torches flickered faintly through the woods. Floodlights up on the hill, where Hitler's Berghof was located, sent beams into the sky. The entire hillside seemed to be alive with activity. "Mission Priority 2. You must leave Liam O'Connor. You must not be captured alive. Hide and wait the return window or backup window. You must return immediately." Just help me get you up. I'll not leave you here to..." "Negative. Self-determination must be activated." "No, don't you do that, Bob. I mean it, don't you do that." Bob gurgled more blood. "Mission Priority 3. Support unit cannot fall into the hands of..." "No, that's crazy. We can get you out of here. If you just get off your backside, you big lump." "Negative. You must leave now. You must leave now." "Bob, will you shut your mouth for just a second?" "Leave now. Leave now." "Bob, please. You don't need to terminate. I'll do it. I'll do it." He looked around the blood-stained snow and saw what he was after.